Hello everyone. In the last video I explained how to replace a hard-coded JSON data used in the same front-end page by an API which returns the same data in the same format from the backend. We used fetch to get the data from that API, converted it to JSON and applied in the use state to display it in the component, and controlled it using use effect. So that video was all about how to use the API and display the data using all these hooks. And this states data we displayed in the home page to show the list of states from the backend. Now in this video I will talk about creating the API, and we'll create an API for the list of cities. So we have two ways to create API in Nextjs depending on the requirement. Sometimes we don't need a full-fledged complex APIs. We just need simple APIs like here, just list of states, list of cities. There's no heavy business logic involved, or there is no other interface like a mobile app which is using that API. So that lightweight API is integrated into the Next.js application itself. So we create that API in the Next.js repo, like this repo only. So this one repo will have the front end and also the back end. But when our complex scenario uh, requires a complex APIs, like we need business logic, authentication, or API is used in other interfaces like mobile app. So in that case we don't integrate the API here. We keep this as front end. So this web front end will be a separate project. A mobile front end will be a separate project, and the API will be a separate backend project that will be full-fledged backend application created using Node.js and Express.js framework. So the lightweight API uses Next.js framework to create the backend, but the heavy complex API system uses the Express.js full-fledged API framework. So in our case, we don't require that Express.js setup. So as we need just like lightweight APIs, list of states, list of cities, so we can create the APIs here itself. Okay, so I'll explain you in this video how to create APIs in Next.js. Creating APIs using Express.js is like whole different training. It requires multiple sessions to explain all the concepts. So here we will understand how to create APIs in Next.js. As you can see, we have this folder where we have this app folder. Inside that we have all the pages. So here inside this page only, this folder only, we'll create an API folder and we'll create the API there. So in this state page, this thing, we have a list of cities which we are using here and displaying the data from this hard-coded cities list. Now as we did in the state page, we removed this hard-coded JSON, and similar JSON is coming in the API. Now this API we are creating ourselves, so we'll keep the data same exact, because the state data is returning a little bit different, but in our case we'll keep the same JSON. We'll move this data from front end to the back end. So in actual scenario, the backend fetches data from database. That's the third layer. But let's talk about the second layer right now. So instead of hard coding in the front end, we'll hard code it in the back end, so that API can return this data and front end can use the API. Okay, so we will not hard code the back data in the front end. We'll hard code this data in the back end. So back end can return JSON from this hard coded data, but front end will use the API. Later we can switch this hard code data by a database. Okay, as I told you, front end does not connect to the database. So we need a backend. When a separate backend project exists, that is totally different from front end. But in the Next.js, when we create an API, it's part of that front end repository. So you will ask, so that will be a front end only? But no, Next.js handles that very smartly. When we create an API folder, it remains in the backend, it remains in the server. It does not is not accessible from the browser. So the repository is same, deployment is same, but it is secure and remains in the backend. So any secure logic or any authentication we can do there, which we cannot do in the front end. Like inside that, if we create an API folder and create the API, that can connect to the database, that can have database credentials, but that same credential cannot be added here and connect to the database directly. Okay, because this is not secure, this is public. But when we create an API folder inside this app folder, that is a secure folder and is not accessible directly from the front end. So we create an API folder, and inside that we need to create a folder for whatever data we need. So let's see the Next.js documentation. So here you can see API, then search and route.ts. Here users, we want users data. So it's API/users and then route.ts. And in the route.ts we have get, post and other REST methods like delete and all those things. If we want to get, so we will use get. If you want to post, we will use post. So in our case it is cities. So inside this API folder we'll create a folder cities, right? And inside this the standard route.ts. Okay, and then we create a function, either a get function or a post function. If we want to update some data, we'll create post function, but we just want to get cities, so we'll create a get function which will return the cities. So like this, export async function get, and this will be the request, and here we will return the cities data. Instead of users we need cities, so we can copy it from here and we'll remove it from here. So we cut from here and paste here. Okay, so we have the same data which in practice will connect to the database and get it, but right now it is getting from here. So this is a JSON data, but APIs does not return direct JSON, it converts it into string, so it can be transferred. So it's converted, cities is converted into string and it's returned as a response with this success message and header as JSON, that this is a actually a JSON data. It could be XML, so here it will be XML. So this is the standard format, return new response, the string data, and these two fields, status and headers. So if I save it, then we can access it like we access the states data like an API. So let's see if it's working. So what will be the URL? So as you see here, we have localhost 3000. This is the server URL. So we'll do localhost 3000, and then it's an API, right? So we have this API folder. So we'll do API, and then slash, we have cities. So cities. And right now if you see here, we are not using any parameter. We are just returning everything. So this should return the JSON data. See, right? So now we have this API. When you deploy this to server, this will be like suppose medmatch.com. So medmatch.com slash API slash cities. So it can be used like the way we use this state API. But as this is in the same server, we have same base URL. Whatever is the front end URL, same URL with API route. Now we can use this API here, same way as we did for this. So we'll use this use effect here. So cities from API, set cities from API. Initially it will be empty. Import this use state, then use effect, import that also. Inside this, fetch cities, and API will be this one. Okay, so we are not using hard coded, we are calling use effect, calling this fetch cities method, which will use fetch with this URL. It will get the data, convert it into JSON, and apply to this cities from API, which we will use here instead of the cities, right? And then everything should be same. So this use effect work with client, so we'll have to add use client flag. Okay, now go to California. See, this is coming from the API. If you want to make sure, let's display let's return empty and see what happens. Okay, no data because this backend does not return cities, so it's empty. If I undo this, so now it will return the data. So now we don't have the hard-coded cities here in front end. It's coming from the API, and this API has this data which can come from the backend database. Okay, so this way we create the APIs in Next.js. So this API cities is secure. Like if we can add authentication and all, then it will be secured. It's not directly accessible. Like if you write the data in the front end, it's converted to HTML and you can go to view source and get the data, but you cannot get the data from the file directly. You have to use this route, which can be password protected. Okay, so now using the same way, you can create more APIs. Like you can convert this API to local states API, right? Create states here, then departments and doctors, all those JSON from front end can be converted into APIs here. So try to do that, convert all the front end JSON data with APIs and use this use effect and API in all the pages. So now after this task, all the data in the front end should come from the backend. If you have any doubt, you can message me.